Hey, it's Melina, and you're watching Girl in the Verse, the video podcast, where we explore the exciting world of decentralized technology and the people driving its innovation. What the F is an NFT, and why do they matter? What about decentralization and Web3 or cryptocurrency? Is it all a scam, or is it here to stay? If you've ever asked yourself these questions, know that you are not alone. I myself have asked a lot of questions, anywhere between owning a digital wallet, minting NFTs, dealing with gas fees, and a lot more. Whether you're a seasoned crypto veteran or just getting started on your journey into the wild west of Web3, this podcast is for you. My name is Melina. I am the founder of Girl in the Verse. My job really is to have conversations with founders and builders and artists and businesses and a lot more people in this space who have entered Web3, talk about their journey and why all of them believe that this is the future. This is it, friends. It's right now, and we are living it. And I'm so honored to be here to have this stage with you to ask the right questions. Okay, without further ado, let's dive right in. You know, I'm still here having to convince my family and friends right over the Christmas holidays about what we're doing in this space. So we are very early, we're very aware, but you know, the goal of this podcast is really to get people interested in what we're, fangirling about, but also getting people to understand where we are going. And I will say a lot of the people I've interviewed, everyone believes that this technology is here to stay. So I'm inviting you to learn about this collectively with us. If you're on Twitter Spaces, be aware that this is also being recorded video. So our attention is actually, looking at the camera today. So let me just introduce a little. Today, I have the pleasure of having Carlee here. She's a writer and, really involved in Web3 content creation as well. And I discovered her reading the BFF blog. A lot of us who entered the space maybe a year ago are very familiar with BFF. A lot of onboarding happened about like this time last year, Carlee, I believe. But what I really wanted to dive in was really getting the sense of, right, this is the new year, January 2023. This is the time of year when many of us feel like, okay, this is the perfect time to start that project, to start a video, to start a podcast, to start a blog, to start whatever it is, right? A beginning of a fresh new year. But we are very aware that although we want to start and do everything, that type of that sentiment of like, oh my God, this is becoming overwhelming, right? That burnout feeling I know is very, very prevalent in this space as well. It's, burnout is a real thing. Carlee, talk to us about, feeling that burnout in this space, specifically in Web3, because we know the cycle here we don't sleep, right? Nobody sleeps in Web3.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why for BFF specifically, I'd written an article about Web3 burnout and Web3 burnout specifically, because burnout happens all the time for many industries. And for some reason in Web3, it just feels like exactly what you just said. You have to be online all the time, or there's new things like happening, new technologies are coming out, new projects are coming out, and you have to be on top of everything or else you're not, I don't want to say like a Web3 expert, but you're not like, I think in order to actually dive into Web3 and into the technology that is changing what we're doing, you actually have to take breaks. You have to take time to actually do some deep learning. And if you do spend that time, you, in a weird way, like, okay, you take a chunk of like 3 months, you pick one niche topic to dive into and learn heavily, right? Let's say you want to learn how to code in Solidity. You're not going to be further behind. You're actually going to be way ahead of people who didn't take that time and who are just maybe like scrolling on Web3 Twitter. So like, I think the burnout comes when you feel like you always have to be constantly engaging. What are the symptoms of burnout? Well, it's like you start feeling almost like a depression, right? Like you don't feel as passionate about what you were doing anymore. You don't want to be online. You don't want to start these conversations. You might be dreading, like, clocking in for work or something, right? And there's also like physical symptoms of you feel tired, you
I was going to
feel.
say, Carlee, sometimes I myself have this like content block. I'm like, what can I create today? Like, there's this block because of that feeling of I need to put something out there right now. Even those like GM tweets that I see in the morning, those can sort of be some sort of toxic positivity as well. This GM, always constantly having to tweet. With your research, Carlee, what else did you see? Like, what were the signs? Because again, and I said it in the intro, like Web3 doesn't sleep. So for a lot of like people in Web2, they're like, okay, I'm just going to go put my phone away. But this space, the information we're getting and gathering is happening in real time, right? So what would you tell someone right now who's like, but I got to be in this space or I got to do this? And, not to say that we're wasting our time, but that sentiment of feeling like, or that FOMO feeling, I think that's another thing too, is like, I think for a lot of us, it's that FOMO, like I'm going to miss out if I'm not in this space today because I'm not going to be there, not going to be the first one to know it, right? Like, what would you tell someone right now? Like, what would be your tips? Like after the research that you did, what would you recommend to someone right now in Web3 or someone who wants to get into Web3?
Yeah, like some of the things seem very basic, but actually do help. Like find maybe some people that are like actively working in this space that also have a newsletter that comes out once a week, and that in a way, like, that's kind of almost a hack because they are staying up on information, and if you get their newsletter once a week, you also get all of that information, and it's right in your email, and you don't have to spend like 10 hours on Clubhouse or on Twitter, or and at the same time, I think it would be kind of, again, like, there's so much, so I would niche down in the beginning. If you want to learn everything, it's going to be so overwhelming that you're going to get lost anyway, and you're not actually going to learn anything from that.
It's true. And this is why I wanted to start the year talking about this, because I think for a lot of people, it's like, I know right after the 31st, already Jan 1st, everyone was like, okay, what are your resolutions? What are your goals? And what are you accomplishing in the next like Q1? Why would you tell someone, or why do you think it's important to build that community as well?
Yeah, I think community building, one, in Web3, needs to change a little bit. Like, and I think it is. So I think over the last few years in like the crypto NFT Web3 space, community building was seen as, okay, I'm having this group of people. Now they're going to buy my token or they're going to buy my NFT or something like that. And there was a lot less focus on value. We saw a lot of communities that just didn't deliver what they said they were going to deliver. Yeah. That's not really community building, right?
What should businesses or creators or anyone who's starting in this space, how should we be looking at community building for 2023?
Yeah, one of the things I think that's important is there was a really big focus on, let's say, wherever your community is, if it's not active, if somebody isn't posting every single minute, then your community's dead and it's not worth it or whatever. And that's totally not true. People have lives, right? Like,
what would you tell people too? Like, so I'm on every social media platform right now. What my main goal this year for myself is not trying to be on one platform, right? I think we've seen it in the past, Twitter Spaces being down one day. I think it shook the whole place, right? Everyone was like, where do we go from here? What do you think about building these communities potentially on different platforms?
Yeah, I think for content creators too, one of the interesting things is I think that search is still huge. I used to work at a podcast marketing agency, and one of my things was I would edit the audio, post the podcast, and then do the email copywriting. And one of the biggest things that actually grew podcasts or grew content for people, because we were posting on podcast platforms as well as YouTube, was creating searchable titles. Because so many podcasts start out, they don't create searchable titles. And it's just like when you start a YouTube channel, you have to start out with searchable videos so that people find them, then they kind of connect with you, then you can make other types of videos. Don't get burnt out, because I know that it is so hard to stay on all the social platforms.
What's another tip you can give to those starting out? It's a fresh new year. I want to build my community. I potentially want to build an NFT project.
Yeah, so if you wanted to start a project, like I think the best projects have one like a reason for starting the project aside from I want to make a bunch of money. Yes, like we live in a world where money matters. So I think if you want your project to last, you should probably have a way to make money. But that isn't like the end all be all goal, right? So you have a reason as to why people actually get value from what you're doing. Now, what are your next steps? If you are starting a project around, like, let's say your podcast or something, you would have your podcast and maybe you'd have a newsletter. And what I would do is I would use my podcast. So that could be 50 searchable podcast episodes that answer a question. I would link my newsletter and people would find it. And I would also do that on YouTube. That has worked for me in the past. And I would also connect my community hub from there. And I would make sure that my onboarding process, like if I was going to be starting a community and I had all the, because now we have that funnel set up, I would make sure that my onboarding process when people join the community was all already planned. So it doesn't have to be anything crazy, but I would have like maybe an intro video if people are joining your Facebook community, because they are still pretty big actually, or Discord or wherever. You have like an intro video that tells people, hey, this is what you do next, right? And here's where you can get a digital download. So you're giving people something immediately as soon as they join. So they already have this good feeling about the community. They're already getting something from it. A lot of times, if you're a solo creator, you create something, people will usually purchase it.
How do you talk to those who don't really get it? What are your go-to sentences when you're talking to your friends or your family members who just don't understand what you're doing?
Okay, that's a big one because it is so. I feel like it is difficult. I had this
It is
conversation
hard.
with somebody that wanted to know, like, well, what is Web3? And like, I think we all know like the technical answer, which is like, a blend of blockchain technology, artificial intelligence, and the Internet of Things. But what does that really mean? And why is like this huge, like, why has it become a trend, right? So I think Web3 is like a mix of technology and culture coming together. And, in the beginning, people were very excited about decentralized finances as a way to like own their finances where the bank couldn't mess with it, because that has been a thing in the past with many different countries. And the technology that we have and so much innovation coming in. So I'm not sure if I'm explaining that right, but I have such a hard time with my own family that I'm trying to think, what would I tell them? Because I think it depends on,
It's the hardest.
if you're talking about decentralized finance, or are you talking about like the movement of blockchain and Web3 data? Like there's so much different.
And a bit to your point, there's so many different elements. There's cryptocurrency, there's blockchain, there's NFTs, there's, businesses developing in this space. Carlee, how would you explain why someone should enter, let's say, Web3?
I think why they should enter is because no matter what, like whatever they're doing now, like Web3 is happening regardless and will continue to happen. The technology is here to stay, right? With blockchain technology, that is such a fundamental technology that will be like an underlying layer of everything else to continue. That is not going away. We just saw people come in that really didn't have the best interest or values and wanted to just, I think, try to get rich quick. So I would start by like trying to get people to educate themselves on the actual technology and why that's important, and then go from there.
It's so funny. It's one of those things. It's like, well, how much time have you got? Because this is a big question. And I like this thing where you said, and I remembered vividly, you said, I know people don't want to think about it, but it is coming. It is here. And you know what? I get that a lot. I get that a lot from young parents who have these kids and who are all on their phones. And I'm like, don't you see where we're going? There's so many different elements. And what's so beautiful about this space is that we've all entered it through different avenues, but we're all here saying the same thing, which is we know that this is staying. We're actually excited and happy to be early. But we're also, I think, the ones who are still here, we want a piece of that history. We want to be here to say, hey, look, I pushed the boundaries here. I did this. I changed this. We were here. I was there. I was present. I bought this because I believed in that, right? Like all these things is what's going, I think, to push where Web3 is headed in this new year. And I like that about the music NFTs. Music for me is like my next thing. I say music and fashion, because these are things that a lot of us are happy to pay for. But wouldn't we be even more excited if like we own something of that favorite artist, of that favorite designer, right? Like all these things are coming, and I'm super excited and bullish on music NFTs. It's funny, Carlee, because I recently was like, you know who I really believe is working on a music NFT? And I really thought this and I said it out loud. I said Taylor Swift, because not only am I a fan of hers, but she has been pushing to own her stuff for a decade, right? Like since she started country to then switching and drifting off into pop music. But I'm excited to see what happens there. We saw again, to bring it back to Taylor Swift, that whole example with Ticketmaster and whatnot. So it's going to be interesting to see, but definitely I am with you on that. Music, and I will say fashion for me is like the next two big ones where I'm hoping helps onboard more people.
Yeah, I think like that's the biggest thing for me is I just don't see how people can say it's all completely a scam when we now have like we have big brands that are using the technology to actually do things. Like we have the Starbucks loyalty program where you hold, they call it like a digital collectible, but it's an NFT, right? So you have your NFT, and now you can get rewards from Starbucks, right? You get exclusive like drink combinations and stuff like that. It actually looks really cool. So that technology is being used by a really big brand, a really big company now, and that's only going to increase. And so the technology is here to stay. It's just in how people use it. And like for DeFi, again, it upsets people, but that technology isn't going away. Governments have now developing and have their own stable coins. It's not going away. I just think we had this really wild time. Yes, I agree that people call it the Wild West because people are doing some crazy things. But the tech is here to stay, and I'm really excited about it. And I think we're just seeing much bigger things. If it's called something different, we were here in the beginning. We still know what it is. You know what I mean?
I love that. Well, Carlee, thank you so much. And you know what? I do want to invite the audience. I always try to end these conversations with a question so that they can, reach out to us. Carlee and I would like to hear from you. What is your idea of community building, and how will you build in 2023 for the Web3 community? Because let's make it about Web3. And as always, you can find us on social media. We've got Carlee on Twitter. I'm on every platform. I feel very annoying because I'm everywhere. Thank you so much, Carlee, for being here. I really appreciate it.